I found myself in situations where the translators needed a translator themselves.
What do you think, or why does a customer first thinking is very important in the context of technical writing?
Can be a really powerful tool that will help improve quality.
Great. You were very spot on understanding that the customers, they don't.
When it comes to researching and staying up to date on trends and approaches, that another option I use is the research I do outside of work. I have an overflowing file cabinet of all the user guides that I've acquired from every software, machine, furniture that I buy. And I use that as a way to train myself on what works best for skimming and simplicity.
Now, while simplicity is the key, are there any risks to oversimplifying the content?
Welcome to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. And with me today, I have Kirsti Wall, Technical Documentation Manager at Everi. How are you doing, Kirsti?
Hello, I'm doing well. How about you?
Lovely. Thank you for asking. And once again, thank you for your support in this podcast. And I'm super excited to know a lot more about you. But before that, help us understand a little bit more about yourself. How did you got into this professional journey, and how are you enjoying so far?
Oh yeah, of course. And again, thank you so much for having me. As you said, my name is Kirsti Wall, and I am a technical documentation manager in the casino gaming industry. I work for a company named Everi, which is one of the largest suppliers of technology solutions for casino operations. I oversee technical documentation for 5 areas in my company, and I lead teams across multiple time zones. So as a technical communicator, I specialize in making complex ideas simple, clear, and usable, especially for those who don't have a technical background like myself. So I use my background and my graphic design hobby as tools to help others learn faster and understand things easier. So to talk about how I got into technical documentation, it was not a linear path like most in the field. There's usually other things that were considered career-wise, and they just end up finding themselves in this field. And that's what happened with me. I was a broke waitress in Indiana, and I realized I couldn't be a broke waitress for the rest of my life. So I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I moved back home to Michigan to attend the university my father worked at because I wanted the reduced tuition.
Yeah.
And the university I attended was an engineering school, which is ironic for me because I am not engineering smart. So I picked my major, technical communications, based on the fact that it wasn't engineering.
Okay.
So that's how I got into it. I didn't quite understand what it was. Again, it's not engineering.
Yeah.
And as I learned more about the field, learning more that technical writers act as translators for engineers. But even if that's the case, because of the fact that I'm not engineering smart, I found myself in situations where the translators needed a translator themselves. And I eventually discovered that I wasn't alone in this. So I became a translator for the translators and an advocate for the user. So, and mentioning graphic design, it initially started as a hobby of mine, but I used it as a tool to understand the information. Because in order to design communications, you have to understand the information and understand how to break it down. So that became a tool for me, not only for me, but to help users understand technical content. So that's a little bit of my journey into it. It's working out really well for me. I've had the pleasure of working in multiple industries with numerous incredible people, incredible writers, incredible subject matter experts. And it's just been great for me. It's been a great learning experience, great industry, and I'm happy I ended up here.
Lovely. What a lovely journey you have, Kirsti, and well done for all the successes you have achieved so far and much more to come on the way. Now, what do you think, or why does a customer first thinking is very important in the context of technical writing?
I think it's very important because it is almost like a first line of defense for your customers and how they understand your information. So thinking about the customer first, thinking about how they're going to use your information really comes down to its success. From my experience, while this is a writing field, it seems common that people misunderstand how people are using our instructions. When people are using our instructions, they're not reading it from cover to cover. They might not even just be reading it in chronological order.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people don't read our documentation. So even coming from the understanding of we are the writers of documents that people typically don't read, it's a very humbling field. But even going in there and knowing that the customer is going in, most likely they're frustrated, most likely they're annoyed. And I word it as quick in, quick out, because that is what your reader is going to be doing. They want quick in, get their information, quick out. So it's really important to keep that in mind when you're writing your instructions, because that will affect how you set it up, how skimmable, how concise your content is. And that really comes down to your customer success with your documentation. So that's why it's incredibly crucial.
Great. You were very spot on understanding that the customers, most of the users, they don't read line by line. Rather, they just scan the contents, right? Now,
Mhm.
when it comes to forming the contents, what are your favorite structural or formatting techniques?
I think in general, the main thing I really keep in mind is just the understanding that the user is most likely skimming the information, scanning, like you said, and wording it in a way where it allows that, where it enhances it. Using some of my graphic design experience, I'm a big fan of using negative space and design as a way to guide the reader through the content.
Okay.
Using graphic design, it acts as a visual cue to indirectly lead the user to the information they need while they're skimming.
Right. Now everybody knows, and that's the main purpose of your style of writing, simplicity, right? It's a
Mhm.
key. Now, while simplicity is the key, are there any risks to oversimplifying the content?
I think there is. From my experience when I was a technical writer, it seemed like they would have the concern of not wanting to oversimplify, but then they would put their focus on things that wouldn't be as useful to the reader. I've seen instructions where they go in depth and detail on things that users are probably doing multiple times a day with other software. For example, like logging in. When it
Mhm.
comes to instructions like logging in, that you can simplify because your reader most likely knows that. And then when you simplify that, that's where you can save room for the content that truly matters, what makes your software unique, what is different about your software. And that's where you can really dive into detail to help the user use it.
Understand. Understand. Great. Now, when it comes to metrics, particularly for simple contents or skimmable contents, what metrics do you think best reflects the reduction in support ticket or even driving a user success?
I know that there are readability formulas you can use. I'm aware of them, but I haven't had the chance to use them in my work
Mm-hmm.
because typically in the environment, you have to get the instructions out in a timely manner. And a lot of environments I worked in don't have that flexibility. So that is an option. Another option I use is the research I do outside of work. I have an overflowing file cabinet of all the user guides that I've acquired from every software, machine, furniture that I buy. And I use that as a way to train myself on what works best for skimming and simplicity. I use that as a way to train. Additionally, ChatGPT is an excellent tool for this.
Yeah.
I use ChatGPT as a tool, sometimes as another writer in a way, if I
Yeah.
need to brainstorm ideas. For me personally, with my writing, I tend to be more wordy. So if I'm struggling with it or if I'm stuck, I'll use ChatGPT as a way to think of different ways to write it and as a tool. But I think it really comes down to the work you do outside of work when it comes to researching and staying up to date on trends and approaches that are, work best for your reader.
Understand. Now, I think you kind of touch based on the next question of mine, which is now everybody is in this era of AI. Now, how do you see customer first writing going to evolve in the next few years, especially with the rise of AI?
I can see it going multiple ways. I can see some companies replacing technical writers with AI. To be realistic about it, just because it is common in our field still, where some companies don't have technical writers, they have engineering solving that function. However, it's not going to be as powerful and as well written as having someone who is trained in technical writing. And that's the same for AI. I think for those who will thrive in a world of AI are those who leverage it as a tool, similar to how, for an example, in Microsoft Word, you use spell check. Spell check is not going to write the content for you. And spell check is also not going to know the difference between, for an example, I led a team and I have a lead pencil. And it's little nuances like that, that from my experience, AI doesn't know the difference between either. I find myself, while I use AI, having to edit it. So I think it can be a really powerful tool that will help improve quality and improve efficiency for those who know how to leverage it to their advantage.
Spot on. Lovely. Now, Christy, going back to my rapid fire round questions, any relevant documentation related resources you can recommend to our audiences today?
I would say to really leverage into your hobbies. I know when you think technical documentation, you think user guides, furniture, software, but a part of my overflowing cabinet of documentation comes from the things that I do in my hobbies. My headset equipment, I have the user guide for that. My mic, I have the user guide for that. The most recent resource I used and referenced were the release notes for my favorite video game.
All right.
So go into the things that you use even every day, thinking, I don't have them next to me, but Lysol wipes.
Yeah.
There are instructions on Lysol wipes for what to do in case of emergency. Maybe look at your toothpaste, items you wouldn't think of.
Yeah.
Really reference those too, because those are items that your average user is going to be looking at and reading. I think that's a tremendous tool.
All right. Very different to resource, to be really honest, Kirsty. And now one word that comes to your mind instantly when I say documentation.
Empowerment.
All right. Now a piece of advice to a 20-year-old self.
I would say use your weakness as your strength. Use your weakness as your career strength and your hobby as your career specialty. Because the things that make you feel different will become your biggest advantage.
Okay. Interesting. Now, anything else I missed to ask you today? I think I was curious to learn your approach, and you helped me understand a lot more on the customer first approach towards documentation. And it's amazing to see how you started and then what you're doing currently. And all I can say is all the very best for your future projects.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsty, for your time, and have a lovely day.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.